Welcome to the deep dive. Our mission here is to take a complex stack of sources and really pull out the core knowledge you need, the critical details, the overlooked context that truly explain a story. And today we're doing a deep dive into the profoundly unsettling case of Aundria Bowman. Her disappearance in 1989 was recently profiled in that Netflix documentary, Into the Fire, The Lost Daughter. Aundria, who was born Alexis Miranda Badger, vanished when she was just 14 years old. And the sources we've looked at, well, they reveal so much that either wasn't in the popular accounts or was just, minimized. Our goal is to really expose the pattern of abuse, the massive systemic failures, and the remarkable decades-long fight by her biological mother, Cathy Terkanian.
It's not a random tragedy. The sources make that very clear.
Yeah.
This is a catastrophic and, preventable outcome. Aundria was adopted by Dennis and Brenda Bowman, and her disappearance was almost immediately and completely incorrectly classified as a runaway case.
And that classification did so much damage.
Oh, it was devastating. It shielded the perpetrator, and it allowed him to operate freely for over 30 years. This case really exposes what happens when a system just fails to look beneath the surface of what one source calls the dark side of a seemingly normal family.
Okay, let's unpack this, and let's start exactly where the system failed with those undeniable warning signs that were tragically ignored long before she ever disappeared. Because the sources, they really emphasized the allegations of sexual abuse against her adoptive father, Dennis Bowman. They weren't just vague whispers.
No, not at all. They were direct reports. Aundria, in late 1988, she reported the abuse to staff at her high school.
So this wasn't just a suspicion.
No. This led to direct involvement from both police and social workers. This was a clear intervention point where the system had a responsibility to act.
So if authorities were involved, what was the response from Dennis and Brenda Bowman? Their 14-year-old daughters reaching out for help, making these incredibly serious allegations. What did they do?
Well, their response was immediate and, frankly, calculated deflection. They just outright dismissed the claims. Their story to the authorities was that Aundria was acting out, that she was rebellious and making it all up because, they claimed, she had just found out she was adopted.
Convenient excuse.
The perfect excuse. Now, some sources suggest Aundria may have known all along, but the Bowmans used this narrative to explain away any report of abuse.
And it wasn't just that the allegations were ignored. Shortly after the authorities got involved, the family makes this highly suspicious move. They relocate to a rural mobile home.
That move is so critical. It's a calculated attempt at isolation. By moving out to a rural area, they severely limited her access to her support systems, her friends, her school.
The very people she had reported the abuse in the first place.
Exactly. They cut off her lifelines.
And the sources show there were other witnesses. Friends like Jennifer Jones and Michelle Timmer said Aundria told them about the abuse. Kim Payne actually described witnessing Dennis strike Aundria at dinner, while Brenda just looked on, did nothing.
And despite all these red flags, the police intervention was a disaster. In one truly egregious example from the reports, an officer didn't offer her protection. Instead, he reportedly admonished Aundria.
Admonished her.
Yes. Told her, in essence, to learn her place as a daughter.
Learn her place as a daughter, that one phrase. It speaks volumes about the priorities back then, doesn't it?
It's all about keeping the family unit intact, not protecting the child. And what he told the parents was just as bad. He basically said, do whatever it took to keep us from having to come back here again.
Wow.
It was an institutional rubber stamp on the abuse. It told the Bowmans that they held total control. And that systemic failure is why she remained in that home. It's what led to her death.
Which brings us to the most catastrophic failure of all, that initial misclassification. When she's reported missing on March 11, 1989, Dennis Bowman immediately tells police she stole $100 and ran away.
And that endangered runaway label, well, it gave Dennis Bowman a 3-decade head start. The focus was immediately off the family. The narrative became that the child was the problem.
And when you look at his history, it's just mind-boggling how negligent that was. This was a man with an extensive violent criminal past.
It's a stunning oversight. I mean, let's go back to 1980, almost a decade before Aundria disappeared. Bowman was arrested and pleaded guilty to assault with intent to commit criminal sexual conduct.
What were the details of that?
He ran an 18-year-old woman's bicycle off the road with his motorcycle, pointed a gun at her, and tried to force her into the woods. He served 5 years and was paroled in 1986.
So wait, he was a convicted sexual predator out on parole just 3 years before Aundria vanished from his home.
Yes, and he's the one whose adopted daughter disappears after reporting sexual abuse against him, and he is somehow not the primary suspect. It's unbelievable.
And the pattern just continued, even after Aundria was gone.
Oh, absolutely. In 1998, 9 years after she went missing, he's arrested again, this time for breaking into a female coworker's home. And what police found at his house, it paints this terrifying picture.
What did they find?
They found a duffel bag with her undergarments in it, but they also found a black mask, dark clothing, and a sawed-off shotgun. This is not the behavior of a reformed citizen. This is a predator's toolkit.
And he just got a year in jail for that. Aundria's case remained cold for another 20 years. So what finally broke it open? It wasn't anything in Michigan, was it?
No, it's completely external. Bowman was arrested in November 2019, but for the 1980 murder of Kathleen Doyle in Norfolk, Virginia, a cold case solved by modern DNA evidence. His arrest for that murder was the only reason the focus finally returned to Aundria.
So once he was behind bars facing life sentences for the Doyle case, the pressure was finally on. And that's when the whole runaway story just crumbled.
It completely fell apart.
Yeah.
The shifting nature of his confession, it just reveals his desperate attempts to minimize what he did. He first skipped to the story that she stole money and ran away.
A story that never made any sense.
Never. Sources point out she was excited about a band festival that very day. A runaway doesn't usually make plans for a school event right before leaving forever.
So when he finally confesses to killing her, his story keeps changing.
It's all over the place. Initially, he claims he pushed her down the stairs in a rage after she threatened to report the abuse again, claiming her neck broke instantly.
So he's aiming for manslaughter, not murder.
Exactly. But his story changed. He later admitted to police that she was still conscious, still moaning after the fall. That completely changes the crime.
And the details of the concealment are they're beyond horrifying.
He confessed to immediately hiding her body in the barn, burning her belongings in a barrel to destroy the evidence. But it got so much worse.
This is the part of the story that's often just glossed over.
As police pressed him, he admitted to the dismemberment. He used a machete and an axe to cut up Aundria's body to fit her remains into a cardboard barrel. This wasn't panic. This was methodical.
And then they moved. They moved homes,
Yeah.
and he didn't leave the crime behind.
No, he dug up that barrel with her remains and took it to the new house, reburying it in the yard. He literally carried the evidence of his crime with him and lived on top of it for years.
The discovery of her remains in his yard in February 2020 finally led to the legal conclusion, didn't it?
It did. In December 2021, he entered a no-contest plea to second-degree murder. He got 35 to 50 years, but that was on top of the 2 life sentences he already had in Virginia.
It's impossible to talk about the resolution here without focusing on the single most important factor outside of that DNA hit. Aundria's biological mother, Cathy Terkanian.
She is the catalyst for justice in this case, absolutely. And how she found out is just heartbreaking in itself.
She didn't even know her daughter was missing for decades.
For 21 years. She found out in 2010 from a social services letter. And they weren't even contacting her about Aundria, not directly.
So why did they contact her?
They wanted her DNA sample to compare with the Racine County Jane Doe, which turned out to be an unrelated case. But that request was the first time Cathy learned that the daughter she'd placed for adoption, Alexis Miranda Badger, was now classified as a missing person.
And once she knew, she just launched this decade-long mission to find the truth.
A relentless mission. She worked with a private investigator, a web sleuth named Carl Koppelman. She put up flyers, she created online accounts, she rented billboards. She generated public pressure when law enforcement had just let the case go cold.
He refused to accept the runaway story.
She never did. She believed from the start that Dennis Bowman was responsible, and she kept the pressure on until the focus finally returned to that family's home.
And what's so important about Cathy's story is that her fight didn't end with the conviction. She is still fighting today.
She's fighting for symbolic and legal closure. She wants the adoption annulled, to legally strip the Bowmans of any parental rights. She's fighting to have Aundria's original name, Alexis Miranda Badger, restored on all legal documents.
So she's trying to legally erase the family that failed her daughter so catastrophically.
Precisely. And she's also fighting for custody of Aundria's ashes. She's publicly said she doesn't believe Brenda Bowman's claim that the ashes were already scattered. She says Aundria or Alexis does not belong with that family.
And this personal tragedy has now driven her into broader advocacy work.
Yes, she's now active with Saving Our Sisters, a nonprofit for abducted children. She's using her own horrific experience to push for real changes in adoption and child welfare laws, making sure criminal histories are thoroughly checked.
So when we connect all these dots, this case really is a profound example of how one person's persistence can overcome decades of just police complacency and systemic neglect.
It is. Cathy Terkanian's efforts brought resolution not just to Aundria's case after 30 years, but indirectly, they led to the conviction of a murderer in the Kathleen Doyle case as well.
So what does this all mean for us? I mean, law enforcement themselves admitted that if this had been handled seriously from the very beginning, the outcome would have been different. Dennis Bowman might have been stopped decades earlier.
And this raises a question that really echoes far beyond this one case. If Aundria was so easily dismissed as an endangered runaway in 1989, despite abuse claims and her adoptive father's violent record, you have to wonder, how many other cold cases from the 80s and 90s, also classified as runaways, are masking similar horrific truths? What steps do we need to take now to go back and review those files?
That initial label, runaway, that single word derailed justice for decades and let a predator walk free. We encourage you to think about that power, the power of a label, and to always look deeper into the stories that seem just a little too simple.